Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Matt Horn
is not available. At the tone, please record your message. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
I've taken lashes my whole life to keep my family safe. But they will never whip my son again.
Hey, Matt. This is Patrick Roper over here in Savannah, Georgia, and I was just calling in to chat about Emperor whenever the film comes out. I guess I'll talk to you soon.
on the line. We have Patrick Roper talking to us. From where are you talking to us from, Patrick?
I am here in Savannah, Georgia.
How is it in Savannah, Georgia?
It's not too bad. We've actually come into spring, which has its good and bad points. It's definitely warmer, but the pollen is kind of killing us, which, considering all the things that are going on right now, does not make it fun for respiratory conditions.
Well, Patrick, on that bombshell, that gives me ammunition to talk about, obviously, the elephant in the room, which is COVID-19. I have done one interview before you, Patrick, and 6 months ago I would never have thought I would have ever uttered the words self-isolation or social distancing, but that seems to be where we are at the minute.
It's definitely been fun in the industry. Things pretty much shut down throughout the U.S. at least, in terms of the film industry, shut down, I would say, about 2 weeks ago. We're all just hanging out and waiting to see what goes. But the nice thing is that pre-production is going on for a lot of projects. They're still casting via self-tape, so that's good. Gives us something to do.
Obviously, I talk to, as you know, many people around the world. Obviously, I've got the information I need from Los Angeles, but I haven't encountered Georgia yet. So my question for you, Patrick, is what's the situation like in Georgia?
It was a bit of a slow rollout. Of course, much of the U.S. ended up rolling out a little slower than most. I've been listening on the radio that there are a few cities here in Georgia that are being hit particularly hard per capita, much worse than a lot of places in the U.S. Luckily, we've done pretty well here, although Savannah's got 2 major hospitals, and we have had a number of cases come in the last few weeks. So I know that they're very busy, but it sounds, from what I'm hearing, it certainly could be worse. There's always a lot of people milling around, and they have been pretty good about locking the place up. It's a ghost town out there right now. So.
I do have to ask the question. You will see the funny side of it, hopefully, even given the circumstances. Are you stocked up?
I'm pretty good. I don't make a point of going too nutty. I probably have enough food, toilet paper, and everything else for a month. But I think that's probably true at any given point in time. As long as stores are still open and whatnot, I'm actually doing pretty good. Are people going loony in the UK?
Oh, of course they are. They're screaming at each other for loo roll. I don't know if you know, our Prime Minister's got it.
Oh, yeah, I heard the other day, yeah.
And the best part is there's a video of him 3 weeks ago addressing a conference, and the first thing he says is, I went to a hospital full of people who had it and I shook their hands. Well, what do you expect?
Probably best not to do that.
Yeah.
We've known for months.
So, the reason why we've got you here is to talk about the film Emperor. It's supposed to be released 2 weeks ago, but due to the whole situation, we're not sure, are we, as to what's going on?
No. Even a month or so ago when this started, they were fairly determined to release it. And then they changed the date from, it was originally supposed to be on, I think it was the 27th of March, and then they actually kicked it down to like the 20th. I don't exactly know what the thinking was there, but they seemed determined to open it. And then they, finally made the decision to just wait. I'm sure that they realized that the financials on that would have been devastating if they'd even tried, because that was about the time they shut all the theaters down. I think they're still pretty determined to release it in the theaters, so it might be later in the year, but we'll just wait and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And it's based on a true life story, isn't it?
It is inspired by the life story of Shields Green, who was an escaped slave. This was just right prior to the Civil War, U.S. Civil War. He was an escaped slave who made his way from South Carolina up to New York, and then he had a chance encounter with Frederick Douglass and John Brown, and then he hooked up with John Brown and participated in the raid at Harper's Ferry, which in U.S. history is roughly thought to be one of the sparks of the Civil War. It happened just a couple of years before the official Civil War kicked in. It was kind of the main event that led into that. So Shields Green was kind of this legendary figure in that whole event. A lot of what the film is based on is actually a lot of the legends and hearsay that was being chattered at the time. So if you watch the trailers, it definitely presents Shields Green as this very kind of mythic, heroic character.
You love your history, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, when you heard about the project, was it? Yeah, I definitely want to do it because of the historical element.
I've always loved history since I was a kid, and certainly made a study of it quite a bit. I was a professional kilt maker for about 20 years here in the U.S. and lectured quite a lot on Scottish and British history in particular, but I certainly love history of all sorts. But when I saw that this project was coming up, I was excited. I jumped at the chance.
You're playing Hank, aren't you? Who's Hank?
Hank Beaumont is a slave overseer. So I am effectively one of the main bad guys in the movie. The situation where I come in is, towards the beginning of the film, is that the plantation that Shields Green is at, it has an owner at the time, and he's not necessarily a terrible, brutal guy, but he has mismanaged his plantation quite a bit and his finances. So the plantation shifts over to a new owner, and that new owner brings in a new slave overseer, who is Hank. And Hank is a particularly brutal guy, so there's a big shift in power that occurs right at the beginning of the movie.
Now, usually at this point, I ask about what it was like working with the cast and crew on set, and if there are any anecdotes about the film. But I have been doing the research. It wasn't an easy filming shoot for you, was it?
I personally had been diagnosed with kidney cancer at the beginning of the year. This was 2018. So February of 2018, I got the diagnosis of stage 1 renal cell carcinoma, which, if you're going to get kidney cancer, that is the perfect time to get it, which is right at the beginning. And I discovered it completely by luck. So by April, what happened was I got this notice to audition for Emperor, and I told my agent before this, like, just keep me auditioning until I know better, and until I can't work, just keep me working. So I kept auditioning. This audition for Emperor came up in April, and I went to the audition, and I told the casting director at the time, I've got this thing going on, and I'm actually going into surgery in 2 days. So whenever there's going to be callbacks and all that, just we'll see what happens. So I go into surgery. I'm in the hospital for a week, and then I come out, and about 2 days later, I got a notice that I had a callback for the role. So I wasn't obviously in the best physical condition for doing that sort of thing. I still had staples in my side and the drain and all that from the surgery, so I just strapped a back belt around my abdomen and went and did the callback. And they were pretty impressed by the fact that I was standing and there. So we had a good chat, and they asked me if I thought that I would be okay in 6 weeks when they started shooting. And as it just happened to turn out, my doctor had told me that the recovery for this was usually about 6 weeks. So I said, hey, that's perfect timing. So 6 weeks later, I was in pretty good shape to go, and I functioned pretty well. I even did my own stunts during some of the fight scenes. So,
which I've read on your IMDb, and I'm thinking, to go from having cancer to doing fight scenes in 6 weeks seems a bit brutal almost.
It had its challenges. I was still a bit sore and a bit stiff. Most of that 6 weeks that I spent, I was on very strict orders to not lift anything over about 10 pounds. I was pretty limited into what I could do, but I spent that 6 weeks just trying to figure out interesting things to do with this guy. One thing that I knew that I was going to be doing was carrying a very large gun around with me around my waist. So I had actually purchased a replica firearm, same type of firearm I ended up getting for the film. And I would spend a couple hours a day just walking around my house with a gun strapped to me, just to kind of feel what that felt like. Not only just the weight of it, but what kind of swagger do you develop, and what kind of attitude do you develop when you're carrying a 5-pound piece of metal around with you. That was very interesting. I'd never done that before, so I kind of discovered interesting physical things that pop up when you do that, and psychological things. So that was interesting. And
obviously, as a survivor, you're now a sort of an advocate for cancer, aren't you?
Yes, and as it turns out, I'm a two-timer. I had cancer when I was 19 as well, so I've unfortunately had a lot of experience with this, but I have chosen, particularly with what voice I have, to try to advocate particularly for the idea of early detection. The reason that I am alive today is because, with both of these cancers, is because I found them early. And obviously that's the best time to find it. And the reason that I was able to find them early is I just pay very close attention to what my body is telling me, and I don't put things off. And that tends to be a problem with a lot of people when they're not feeling right, or they feel a lump. A lot of people tend to put it off going into the doctor because our health care is very expensive to just go into the doctor. So, I can understand why people are adverse to the possibility, but then there's also the psychological thing of, people get freaked out of thinking, oh, well, if I have cancer, what am I going to do? But my line of thinking has always been, if you have cancer, I would think you want to know about it. So go in, get checked, see what's going on, and from that information, from that knowledge, you have power. You have a place to go. I think that it's much more empowering to know about it, because then you can deal with it.
I mean, you mentioned early detection and obviously a bit of vigilance as well. What should people really be looking out for?
The definite things are, of course, the obvious, which are lumps. Lumps that weren't there before. Obviously, different types of cancers, you're not going to necessarily have a lump somewhere. But the first cancer I had years ago, I felt a lump that was actually pretty close to the skin. But, lumps can be any number of things, so it's not necessarily something you have to freak out about. But I kept my eye on it for a couple of weeks, and it didn't change. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't do anything. So that was a sign to me of, okay, this is not normal. It's not something that's coming and going. I thought, okay, let's just get this checked. With other symptoms, unfortunately, cancer has a whole host of symptoms, different types of cancers. So anytime you're feeling horribly fatigued, weird pains, my big thing is, if it's something that's not normal, pay attention to it. You don't have to freak out. You don't have to go to the doctor necessarily immediately, but just be aware of it, monitor it, take your daily observation of what your body is, what's happening. And if it's getting worse, if it's not changing, then it's something to get checked out. And this goes not just for cancer, this goes for everything. as we grow older, we have aches, pains. Sometimes we just don't even think about it. But I think the big thing is make a mental note of it. If it's something that continues and it doesn't get better, it doesn't improve, then go get it checked out. Other than costing you a few bucks to go get it checked and get some tests, that's peace of mind right there. On the good side, maybe it's nothing. On the bad side, maybe you find out that you have everything to lose now. So it's best, again, in my opinion, it's best to know. So yeah, just monitor symptoms when they come up.
And if you're in the UK, free healthcare.
You guys are definitely lucky that way. And I have followed a number of organizations in the UK because, unfortunately, men universally are very guilty of this sort of behavior of ignoring problems when they come up. And interestingly enough, I've noticed that there's a lot of organizations in the UK that have been coming out recently in the last 5 or so years that are targeted specifically for men to try and get them to get themselves checked. And when I've researched that, the figures from what I've seen is that women get more cancer, they get diagnosed with cancer more often, but in the last 30 years or so, we've had a lot of advocates for women's cancer care. So you can see PSAs on television, and there's definitely been a huge advocacy component, but there hasn't been as much advocacy for men. And as it turns out, men actually die from cancer more than women do typically. And a huge part of the reason of that is that men have a kind of horrible, nasty tendency to ignore problems when they come up, or just figure that, oh, I'm a man, I'll just walk it off, or I can't afford to be sick because, I have a family to care for, or even worse, in some of these cases with, things like testicular cancer or colon cancer, they just think about all the procedures that are going to be very invasive towards their nether regions, and they don't want to deal with it. I've known men that come to me later on, like kind of late when they discovered something, and go, oh, do you think I should get this checked? I'm like, yeah, you should have gotten that checked months ago. Like, why are you sitting on that? That doesn't make sense to me. But it just seems that men have this nasty tendency to not get things checked. I tend to think that that's a cultural thing.
Well, obviously, to go back to Emperor, with regards to sort of historical films, which obviously have been made by America quite a bit, what are your thoughts on sort of the retelling of accounts in terms of filmmaking?
I still think that it's fundamentally important because it has such a cultural echo. People often will slam historic films because of accuracy issues. And that's totally, that's a totally legitimate gripe. Most historic films are not 100% accurate, but they're also films, and they have to be watchable within a 2-hour time frame usually, which does require a certain amount of dramatic license. So my feeling on that has always been, if you're watching a historic film, even if it's not 100% completely accurate, at the very least, hopefully, it inspires you to go back and look up what actually happened. And I think that tends to be the power of films like this. When I looked up Shields Green, I had a hard time finding a whole heck of a lot. But what I did find were these little snippets of legends. We think he was seen here doing this thing. And I started realizing that, they're basing a lot of this on tellings of the time period more than actual 100% historic fact. But the beauty of that is that it allows people to go in and do their own research about what was going on, see how they might feel about it. So I think that historic films have a great place to inspire people to research this stuff. The way that they approached this film, I wasn't 100% sure what they were going to do with it when I read the script. The script was interesting because, again, I'd done enough research to know it's like there's not a huge depth of info on this guy. Like, what are they doing? And the script kind of read a lot like an action movie, which was interesting. it's very rare that it ever turns out the way that you are picturing it when you're reading the script. When I saw the trailers, that's when it fully solidified in my head what they were doing. The two films that this is definitely going to be compared to the most are going to be things like Django Unchained and 12 Years a Slave. This has much more in common with Django Unchained. It's more of an action film. It's more of a narrative of empowerment rather than a narrative that shows his character as a victim. And I think that is awesome. I have yet to see the whole film, but I'm excited to, because when I saw the trailers and kind of read some more of what people were seeing just even from the trailers, I got like that much more excited.
Well, we haven't mentioned about the fact that one of my favourite actors is in it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Shock and horror. James Cromwell.
Oh, yeah. James Cromwell. Yeah.
Yeah.
I unfortunately never got to work on the same day, so I did not actually get to meet James Cromwell.
Well, obviously, let's talk a bit about you, Patrick. You yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, what made you want to get into acting in the first place?
I probably wanted to be an actor since I was 5. My earliest memories were sitting around and staring at a television screen, and I'm pretty sure that my mother walked in to the room one day while I was watching, Sesame Street or whatever, and she asked me, "What do you want to do when you get older?" And I'm sure she probably expected me to say, "Oh, I want to be a fireman," something big and adventurous. But I pointed at the screen and I went, "I want to do that." And I'm sure she had no idea what I was really talking about. Probably looking at a bunch of puppets on the screen going, "Okay, you're a crazy kid." But I had a weird sense early on that, to me, the greatest job on the planet would be to be an adult that gets to play like a kid and gets paid for it. So when that question would come up later on, the answer never changed. I always would think, I want to be one of these people on the screen. This looks like the most cool job ever. Just be an adult that gets paid to play.
What advice would you give to anyone wanting to pursue a career in the industry?
Well, I tend to think that the old school way is kind of one of the better starting points. I mean, there are certainly a number of angles of getting into this, but the way that tends to be the most user-friendly for people is to get involved in some sort of amateur dramatics, whether that's in the community or at school. That gives most people a beginning foundation and a beginning sense. And there's definitely some discrepancies between theater acting and film acting, but I think that fundamentally a lot of the techniques tend to be very similar, particularly on the emotional side. So it kind of depends on what's accessible to the person, but almost every little town anywhere has got some sort of community theater going on. So I usually recommend to start with that. Now, the flip side of that is that because nowadays, this was different than when I started, nowadays we have camera phones and we've got, infinite accessibility to recording devices. So it can be just as easy as setting up your camera phone and memorizing a scene or memorizing a monologue or whatnot and just practicing. Actors at all levels should be doing that anyway, but that is not a bad starting point. But, functionally, I think finding classes, you can certainly go to school for it, either, at college or a very specific drama school, and that is not a bad approach. And then there are other classes, private classes for various things, whether you want to do camera or audition technique or whatnot. And I also recommend just study everything that you can. Don't just get sucked into one method of doing any particular thing. I started out in classical theater, but then I also studied Stanislavski, and I studied Meisner and Uta Hagen and Stella Adler, and have studied a lot of different ways and methods of doing this over the years. And when I'm working, I just take a little bit of whatever is useful at the time and apply it. So I usually encourage people to study as broadly as possible and find out what works for them.
Well, obviously, I looked at your IMDb because that's what I have to do when I do these interviews. You do tons of other stuff apart from acting. What's that knife that people have? Swiss Army knife. There you go. You're a Swiss Army knife of stuff. Yes. You're a traveller. You like nature. You're a cook.
That also plays into another part of acting that I definitely recommend, which is have a very rich and full life outside of the industry. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is that obviously whatever you learn out in the real world, you can bring back into what you do as an actor. The other part is that because you have such a long span of time sometimes between gigs, you can have a tendency to focus a little bit too much on the work or the lack of work. So it helps to have your brain working on other things. In my case, I have been a nature photographer. I travel. I've been on safari quite a number of times. I have been to India photographing tigers. I've been to Southern Africa photographing the Big Five. I've photographed great white sharks in Mexico and bears and things like that in Yellowstone. So I've traveled the world photographing things, and I grew up cooking, so I love cooking. I cook pretty much every day and have gotten real good at that. And, other things like, the studying of history, like we've mentioned. I just love history. I love nonfiction types of things. I love studying social studies and the way the world works. And then, as it turned out, I was a kilt maker for almost 20 years. That was my side gig for years before I became a really full-time professional actor. Was I made kilts, so I became an expert. I became a master kilt maker and an expert on tartans for about 20 years. So I tried to branch out as far as I could.
What's your favourite thing that you like to cook?
Favorite thing? Wow. Yeah, I love so much food. Italian food tends to be really big, and I've spent a lot of time in Croatia, so I like Croatian food. The seafood in particular is great. I tend to dabble a lot in Croatian seafood dishes.
Are you the type of cook that likes to fuse Croatia with Italy or something like that?
Well, half of the coast there kind of is fused in a lot of ways. They share a lot of similarities in terms of the coast. But, I definitely have studied a lot of different types of cooking. Again, this kind of plays into a lot of the acting thing, is, study a lot of different things. So you study a lot of different types of cooking, and you can always use a trick from one culture and throw it into another culture and see what you come up with.
Well, obviously, you've been in a number of different projects. Which actors and actresses have been your favourites to work with and why? And who would you like to work with in the future?
Oh, wow. Some of my favourite actors that I have worked with, certainly on Emperor, I worked with Dio Okini pretty much every day I was on set, and he is awesome. He is just fantastic. Very, very dedicated, very humble guy. I loved, also on Emperor, my first day, I got to work with MC Gainey. It's not necessarily big name that people will recognize. He's one of those character actors that's been working for years that most people would probably recognize if they saw him, but nobody knows his name. But he played Randolph Stevens in the movie, who is the new plantation owner who hires my character. And I spent a good day with him, just hanging out in the Georgia heat while they were doing setups, and we would just sit around and chat about his career. Those are always the best guys to work with, the old character actors. They tend to have the best knowledge. Most of them are not mega stars, they're working actors, so these are the guys that always have the best stories. I worked on the movie Killer Man a couple of years ago, and I got to work with Zlatko Boric, who, again, most people don't recognize the name if you said it, but if you saw him, you'd know him. He's a Croatian actor, Croatian-Danish actor. Technically, he's a Danish citizen now, but he's from Croatia originally. And he was in the Pusher trilogy of film. And I speak just enough Serbo-Croatian because I've been there a few times to probably get myself in trouble. So when I went up to him and met him, I introduced myself to him in Croatian. His eyes lit up because I'm sure that he never expected to come across a guy in rural Georgia that spoke any Croatian. He and I kind of hit it off really well. So that was a fun experience. In terms of who I would like to work with, wow, yeah, that's definitely a big list. But like off the top of my head, I would love to work with Mads Mikkelsen. Would be great. Harrison Ford has always been a big hero of mine. John Malkovich. Yeah, there's so many.
Are there any particular roles that you would like to do?
People ask me, like, what would be the coolest role? I think a Bond villain would be fun. I would love to play a Bond villain, or something like a Bond villain. I tend to play a lot of what are classically thought of as villains, so I think that would be like the creme de la creme of villain roles, would be something Bond villainish, or a villain in a Star Wars movie. That would be great too.
Well, you've got the beard for it, haven't you, for the villain type roles?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually lost a bunch of weight in the last 6 months. I've just maintained the beard because it probably just hides my double chin, but I'm more of a chiseled and defined jawline now. But I think the beard definitely accentuates that.
Well, I'm going to give you a 1 minute plug, Patrick. 1 minute plug to plug Emperor and anything else you got coming up.
Well, I've got a couple of projects that I unfortunately can't even talk about, like many actors, which sucks because I have to sit and be quiet about those. But for Emperor, obviously we don't know exactly when Emperor is going to come out because it has been postponed due to COVID. But when Emperor does come out, I suspect it will be later on in 2020. And obviously look for that in the theaters when it comes because it looks to be an awesome film. Should be fun. And you can certainly look at the trailers online on YouTube.
Well, Patrick, it's been a pleasure interviewing you.
Yeah, you too. It's been great to chat.
Obviously, we'll have to get you back. But here's a question for you as a final note, because obviously you're a lover of nature, I suppose, and planet Earth. Do you think it's nature basically turning around and saying to the human population, ha ha?
I definitely think that nature has a tendency to recheck our egos. Nature's kind of, obviously from our position, we're looking at it and it's like, oh, this is a bad thing. Well, if you look at it from a natural point of view, this is the way nature tends to work. It's always evolving. So although it sucks for us, it's just kind of the way it goes. I guess it keeps us on our toes. It's the best, most positive way to look at it.
Haven't I heard somewhere that the ozone layer is healing?
That's the fun thing about all these little situations is like everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got quote unquote science that backs up their opinion, although most of it is questionable one way or the other. I tend to like to find the most hardcore scientists I can and listen to those guys.
Well, Patrick, it's been a pleasure interviewing you.
Yeah, it's been great talking.
Thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.